From the very beginning, the galaxy believed it understood humanity. To most alien civilizations, humans were the calm ones, the friendly ones, the ones who always tried to talk instead of fight. They were known for sending diplomats instead of soldiers, for offering treaties instead of threats, and for walking away from arguments that other species would have turned into wars. This reputation wasn't built overnight. It took centuries of interactions, negotiations, and peaceful exchanges. And because humans behaved this way for so long, everyone else assumed this was simply who they were. A peaceful species that avoided conflict at any cost. Across distant star systems, whenever someone spoke about humans, the description rarely changed. They were patient. They were polite. They were predictable. They were harmless. Many alien academies even taught that humans were a stable species, one that never caused trouble and almost never responded aggressively. And for generations, no one questioned it. What no one understood was that humanity's calmness was only one layer of the truth. While humans spent years signing agreements and forming partnerships, they were also quietly studying everything around them, the behavior of other civilizations, the way their ships moved, how their leaders made decisions, and which species were slowly becoming more aggressive. Humans had a habit of observing deeply without making noise about it. They listened when others talked. They watched when others acted. And by staying quiet, they learned more than anyone expected. But the galaxy didn't focus on this hidden part. They preferred to believe humans simply didn't have the appetite for conflict. The more humans stepped away from fights, the more others saw them as weak or overly gentle. Whenever there was a border dispute or a territorial misunderstanding, humans always tried to settle it through discussions. And whenever a ship accidentally crossed into human space, humans rarely reacted with force. They sent warnings, gave extra chances, and allowed the other party to retreat without embarrassment. Most species saw this as softness. The truth was far more complicated. Humanity's quiet patience was not weakness. It was a habit, a strategy, and a way of understanding threats long before they became dangerous. But the galaxy had no idea. To them, humans were simply peaceful. And because of that belief, some species began pushing the boundaries a little more each year. Near the edges of human territory, there were small listening posts and scientific outposts placed far from major population centers. These stations often reported unusual activity ships testing borders, unidentified signals, strange patterns of movement near trade routes. The humans maintaining those outposts noticed all of it, documented all of it, and sent reports back home. But instead of responding aggressively, humanity kept the same calm face they always had. They didn't send fleets. They didn't threaten anyone. They didn't demand explanations. They just observed. This confused many alien strategists. Why would a species allow so many small intrusions without reacting? Some claimed humans were simply too trusting. Others believed humans were afraid to use their military, assuming it wasn't strong enough to handle a real conflict. There were even rumors that Earth's fleet was mostly old, outdated, and only used for symbolic purposes. And because humans never corrected these assumptions, they quietly spread across the galaxy. But deep inside human decision centers, behind layers of secrecy and quiet planning, a different conversation was happening. Leaders, analysts, and observers could see that certain species were slowly testing humanity. They weren't attacking, but they were pushing first lightly, then more boldly. And while the public image of humans was peaceful, the internal response was very different. Humans studied these patterns carefully. They tracked every ship that crossed a border, every unknown transmission, every political shift. They collected information with patience that no one else matched. Some alien intelligence agencies noticed the unusual accuracy of human reports and warned their governments, saying that humans seemed far too calm for what they knew. But those warnings were dismissed. After all, Humanity had never shown any sign of aggression for centuries. Why would they change now? What the galaxy didn't see was how humanity's calmness deepened whenever things became dangerous. But it wasn't the calmness of peace, it was the calmness of focus. A predator hiding its claws, waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, the more humans observed, the more they uncovered. They realized that a small group of species had formed a quiet alliance. These species believed that humans were easy to push around and that their borders could be trimmed little by little without consequences. They misread humanity's silence. They thought a peaceful species would always stay peaceful. Human analysts knew this alliance was growing bold, but they still didn't react aggressively. Instead, they expanded their monitoring systems. They placed more satellites in hidden paths. They built stations disguised as research hubs. Every single move made by this alliance was carefully watched, recorded, and studied to anyone outside. Humanity looked unchanged, peaceful, diplomatic. Uninterested in starting trouble. Inside, humanity was preparing. One of the most interesting things about humans, something the galaxy never truly understood, was that humans rarely rushed into conflict. They didn't attack simply because they could. They didn't show their strength unless they had to. This made them appear harmless. But the reality was that humans preferred knowing everything before deciding anything. And the more they learned, the clearer the picture became. Some alien ambassadors who visited Earth noticed this hidden side. They said humans had quiet eyes, an expression that meant humans observed more than they revealed. But most leaders across the galaxy didn't take those comments seriously. They preferred to believe their own assumptions. Over time, the gap between how humans were seen and who they really were grew wider. The galaxy believed humans were predictable, but humans were watching quietly, preparing for something they hoped would never come. The patience of humanity wasn't the patience of peacekeepers. It was the patience of hunters who studied their environment, waited for patterns, and moved only when absolutely necessary. And still, no one in the galaxy understood this. The longer humans stayed silent, the more comfortable the aggressive species became. They pushed harder, moved closer, tested deeper into human territory. Every small intrusion was met the same way: calm warnings, polite signals, peaceful gestures. The galaxy continued believing humanity feared conflict. What they didn't know was that humans were collecting proof. Every intrusion was logged. Every unauthorized flight path was recorded. Every secret alliance meeting was documented. Humans were building a complete picture long before anyone realized they were even paying attention to the galaxy. Humans were too quiet. To humans, the galaxy was too loud. But patience has limits. And as humanity continued watching from behind the curtain of calm diplomacy, they knew a day was coming, a day when someone would push too far, when the galaxy would discover the truth behind their silence. A day when humanity's reputation would break. A day when everyone would see what humans truly were. Beneath their peaceful image. No one knew it yet, but the moment was already approaching. And when it arrived, the galaxy would finally understand that humans weren't just peacekeepers. They were patient hunters. For years, the galaxy ignored the strange signs surrounding human space. They were small things at first, minor incidents, unusual signals, tiny movements near the outer borders. Most people in the galaxy brushed them off as normal disturbances. But the humans living near those borders noticed everything. They felt something was changing, something subtle but worrying. The galaxy had always believed humans were slow to react, and because of that, many species underestimated them. But the truth was different. Humans were slow only because they paid attention. They didn't jump to conclusions. They studied situations carefully, and this patience helped them sense trouble long before others did. Out in the quiet corners of space, there were small human outposts. Some were research stations, others were listening posts built to track signals traveling across the stars. People working in these remote areas often felt like they were standing between two worlds, the peaceful safety of human civilization and the unpredictable unknown just beyond. They saw strange patterns forming in the galaxy. Even if most people didn't notice, ships from other species would appear near human borders, almost too close. They never crossed fully, but they lingered, as if trying to measure something. Sometimes these ships would send out small signals, almost like tests, before vanishing into the dark. Humans didn't respond aggressively. They simply watched. They collected information and forwarded it to command centers. And with each report, the picture became clearer. Someone out there was quietly studying human space. And not for friendly reasons. Across the galaxy, people from other civilizations argued about what humans really were. Some said humans were too calm and too forgiving. Others believed humans were simply afraid to defend themselves. There were endless discussions, but none of these species really understood the truth. What they interpreted as fear was actually a long, disciplined patience. The alien groups that wanted more power believed their moment had come. Human diplomats were always polite. Human fleets rarely showed up. Human ships avoided confrontation unless absolutely necessary. All of this made certain species believe humans were weak. They didn't think humans were planning anything. They didn't think humans were paying attention, but humanity had never stopped watching. When a strange coalition started forming in distant regions of the galaxy, most civilizations ignored it. They thought it was just another temporary political move. Only the humans noticed the unusual coordination between these species, the way their ships moved together, the way their alliances shifted slowly but consistently. Humans recognized patterns where others saw random events. Information flowed back to human leadership. Analysts studied every report carefully. They didn't panic. They didn't rush. They simply built a more complete understanding each day. The galaxy saw nothing unusual. Everything looked peaceful on the surface. But behind the scenes, humans were tracking every suspicious move, every secret meeting, every small test at their borders. Human observers noticed something even more interesting. The coalition wasn't just watching human space. They were misreading it. They believed humans were not prepared for conflict. They believed humans didn't have the courage or capability to defend themselves. These species convinced themselves that humans only survived because others allowed them to. They had no idea how wrong they were. Back on Earth and other human worlds, scientists and diplomats tried to keep things normal. Trade routes were open, cultural exchanges continued, and humans still welcomed visitors from other species. Nothing on the surface showed tension. But in certain rooms, far away from the public eye, high-level discussions were happening. Humans reviewed every pattern, every small border test, every suspicious message. They didn't talk about war or retaliation. They talked about understanding the truth. Humans had a unique quality that few species understood. When they wanted to know something, they didn't stop until they had the full picture. Their curiosity was stronger than fear. Their patience was stronger than pride. And their calmness was stronger than panic. Some alien intelligence groups tried to warn their leaders. They said humans didn't seem as easy to read as everyone believed. They mentioned that humans often acted calm right before making important decisions. But those warnings were dismissed. The galaxy had become too comfortable believing humans were simply harmless. Meanwhile, the outposts kept sending reports. Their scanners detected movements that didn't fit normal patterns. Unknown transmissions appeared, faded, then appeared again in new locations. Some of the alien ships flying near human space had begun taking the same paths repeatedly, almost like they were mapping something. Humans noticed all of it. Still, they didn't respond. This silence made the coalition even more confident. They believed humans were ignoring them out of fear. They assumed humans lacked the ability to defend themselves. Their leaders met in secret, whispering about how they could take more space or pressure humans into giving up territory. They misinterpreted every human action because they looked only at the surface. They didn't understand what was hiding underneath. The most dangerous mistake they made was believing humans were not preparing at all. In reality, humans were preparing more carefully than anyone else in the galaxy. Instead of building giant fleets in the open, humans reinforced their monitoring systems. Instead of issuing threats, they created detailed strategies. Instead of reacting emotionally, they analyzed everything with a level of patience most other species didn't even know existed. But even with all this preparation, humans still hoped things wouldn't escalate. They were not seeking conflict. They didn't want to intimidate or challenge anyone. Their first goal was always peace. But peace was not the same thing as silence. Peace meant watching carefully, staying ready, and knowing when someone was pushing too far. As the patterns became more obvious, humans noticed that the coalition's tests were no longer small. The ships approaching human borders were stronger and larger. The signals they sent were more precise, like they were measuring response times. It was clear they were no longer just observing. They were planning something. People living near the borders felt an uneasy shift in the air. The quiet reports that once came once a month now arrived almost every week. The small disturbances became bigger. The changes were too clear to ignore. Even ordinary people on the outposts began sensing that something was building up behind the calmness of human space. But even then, humans held on to their patient nature. They didn't want to act first. They didn't want to start a conflict based on assumptions. They continued to gather information, hoping the situation would calm down. But deep inside, they knew something was coming. The coalition kept misreading the silence. They convinced themselves that humans were unaware of the danger. They interpreted humanity's calm monitoring as a lack of understanding. They believed humans were too slow and too peaceful to notice what was unfolding. They had no idea that humans already understood everything. Inside human strategy rooms, people were quietly preparing. They weren't panicking, but they weren't relaxed either. They were focused in a way only humans could be when they sensed something important approaching. They reviewed every possibility and every consequence. They didn't want to react too early or too late. Timing mattered. Understanding mattered. Patience mattered. Humans knew that one day, maybe soon, the coalition would make a move. And humanity also knew something the coalition did not. The quietest species in the galaxy was also the most observant. Humanity had spent years watching, years preparing, years collecting details that no other species even noticed. While the galaxy assumed humans were too gentle for conflict, humans had been building a full picture silently. They didn't brag. They didn't show off their strength. They didn't reveal their intentions. They simply waited. And the more they waited, the more confident they became, not in aggression, but in understanding. They knew exactly who was planning what. They knew where the danger was coming from. And they knew the moment to act was approaching. But as always, humans would let the other side make the first mistake. They were not peacekeepers because they were weak. They were peacekeepers because they chose to be. And if someone forced them to act, they wouldn't act with noise or chaos. They would act with precision, patience, and purpose. The galaxy still didn't understand this. But soon it would, because the signs were no longer small. The tests were no longer simple. The danger was no longer hidden. And the day was coming when humanity's silence would finally break, not in anger, but in clarity. Not to destroy, but to end the growing threat. And when that day arrived, the galaxy would remember it forever. The day humans were no longer misunderstood. The day everyone finally realized they were not peaceful because they were weak. They were peaceful because they were patient, patient hunters. For a long time, the strange movements around human space were small enough for most people to ignore. But then came a moment that changed everything. It didn't start with a huge battle or a dramatic warning. It began with something simple: a research station far from any major human world, sending a quiet message to headquarters. The message wasn't long, but it carried a tone that humans recognized immediately. It said something wasn't right. The station was located on the edge of human territory, so far out that most maps didn't even bother marking it clearly. Only a few workers lived there, studying cosmic dust, star particles, and the faint signals that traveled across deep space. Life at that station was slow and predictable, and that was why the sudden signal they sent felt unusual. Out there, nothing changed unless something big was happening. The message explained that an unknown fleet had appeared near their location. At first, the crew thought it was a random patrol ship, or maybe a passing explorer. But then more signals appeared, and soon they detected multiple ships moving in a pattern too organized to be accidental. These ships didn't respond to friendly greetings, nor did they identify themselves. They simply approached the station, stopped at a distance, and stayed there. People at the station felt uneasy. They sent out another message, explaining that the ships kept moving just close enough to make their presence clear, but not close enough to break any official rules. It was like someone knocking on a door but refusing to step inside, just waiting, watching, testing. Back on Earth and other human worlds, leaders and analysts reviewed the signals carefully. They knew exactly which species could build ships like those. And they knew these weren't friendly visits. The coalition that had been quietly growing in distant regions had finally taken a step forward. They had chosen the research station because it was small, isolated, and far from any major fleet. Most species in the galaxy believed humans would panic or retreat when confronted this way. They thought humans would send diplomats begging for explanations. They assumed humans would try to avoid conflict at all costs. But humans didn't react quickly. They didn't send a large fleet or send threats. They didn't announce anything publicly. They simply sent a small group of observers to monitor the situation more closely. This made the coalition even more confident. They assumed humans were scared to escalate the situation. They thought that quiet response meant humans had no real plan. The people at the research station did their best to continue their work, but everyone felt the pressure. They knew they were being tested. They could almost feel the eyes of the unknown fleet watching them every moment. Even simple activities like running experiments or checking instruments suddenly felt tense. The workers behaved calmly, but deep inside they carried a sense of worry that no one could ignore. A few days later, the unknown ships moved even closer. They still didn't respond to any messages. They didn't fire, didn't warn, didn't retreat. They just approached slowly, as if waiting for humans to react first. The researchers remained calm on the outside, but their reports carried a quiet urgency. They knew something dangerous was unfolding. What happened next was the moment the galaxy would remember. Without warning, one of the unknown ships sent a pulse of energy toward the research station. It wasn't a destructive blast, but it was strong enough to cause temporary system failures. Lights flickered, screens went dark, and communication signals scrambled for a few seconds. For the people inside, those few seconds felt like hours. They didn't know what was coming next. When the systems came back online, the researchers sent an emergency message. They were certain the situation was no longer just a test. It was a direct attempt to intimidate or unsettle them. And even though the pulse didn't cause physical damage, it was more than enough to show the coalition's intentions. But what shocked the coalition wasn't their own action. It was the response they received. Seconds after the pulse, a defense system activated around the research station. This system wasn't widely known in the galaxy. In fact, it wasn't known at all. Humans had never displayed it publicly, never mentioned it, and never allowed anyone outside their species to see it. It was sleek, quiet, and unbelievably fast. The coalition ships were caught completely off guard. The defense system didn't attack them. It didn't need to. Instead, it projected a shield so strong and so precise that it pushed the energy pulse back harmlessly into space. The unknown ships were forced to adjust their positions because the shield altered the local space environment around them. The coalition had expected a simple research station with outdated technology. Instead, they saw a system they couldn't recognize, something far more advanced than anything humans had ever shown on record. The moment that shield appeared, the galaxy's understanding of humans changed a little. Not fully, not completely, but cracks began to form in the old assumptions. The coalition ships quickly backed away, confused and surprised. They had tested humans expecting to see fear. Instead, they saw readiness. Back in human command centers, the response was calm, but everyone felt the shift. Something that had been hidden for years was now revealed, even if only partially. Analysts understood the meaning immediately. Humanity had allowed the world to underestimate them for far too long. And now, the first curtain had been lifted, but the part that truly shocked the coalition wasn't the shield. It was the silence afterward. Humans didn't send angry messages. They didn't demand explanations. They didn't gather fleets to chase the intruders. They simply repaired the station, checked on the staff, and went quiet. This silence made the coalition uneasy. They didn't understand why humans weren't reacting loudly. They didn't know that humans reacted this way only when they were planning something with care. The calmness wasn't weakness. It was focus. The coalition commanders held private meetings, confused by what they had witnessed. They argued about whether humans had been hiding technology for years. They wondered what else humans had kept secret. Some wanted to retreat completely, saying it was too risky to continue testing them. Others insisted that humans must still be weaker overall, and that the research station was just a lucky exception. Meanwhile, humans were studying everything that had happened in detail. They replayed the energy pulse, frame by frame. They analyzed the behavior of the unknown ships. They studied the timing, the formation, the signal patterns. Humans didn't just react, they learned. That was their greatest strength. People living near the border felt a new kind of silence, heavier than before. They knew the galaxy had crossed a line, and they sensed humanity was preparing for something important. But no one panicked. Humans didn't panic easily. They had a unique talent for staying steady, even when the world shifted around them. Across human worlds, the news didn't spread widely. Leaders kept the event quiet to avoid alarming the public. But among those who worked in defense, research, or diplomatic monitoring, everyone understood the same thing. The days of small tests were over. Something larger was coming. The coalition had expected humans to crumble under pressure. But instead, they had revealed a fraction of their hidden strength. And that small revelation was enough to make the coalition uneasy. They had misread humanity for years, believing patience meant vulnerability. They didn't know patience was humanity's strongest weapon. The days following the incident were filled with quiet activity. Human analysts noticed that the coalition ships retreated but didn't disappear. They regrouped farther out, confused but not discouraged. The tension in the galaxy grew thicker, like the air before a storm. Human observers continued sending reports. They didn't express fear-only determination. They had always known this day might come. They were ready, not because they wanted conflict, but because they had prepared for it long before anyone realized. And as everything grew quieter, humanity realized something important. This moment wasn't just a warning. It was the breaking point. The point where patience would no longer be enough to keep the peace. The galaxy had pushed too far. And now humans would decide their next move, not out of anger, but out of understanding that the truth was clearer than ever. Humans weren't peacekeepers because they were weak. They were peacekeepers because they had been watching. And when the moment required them to act, they would act with the same calmness they had shown for centuries, but with a strength the galaxy had never seen. The day was coming, and the galaxy had no idea how much it was about to learn. After the first confrontation near the distant research station, the galaxy began to realize humans were far from ordinary. But no one fully understood what that meant. Most species had assumed that humans were peaceful because they lacked strength, because they avoided conflict out of fear or weakness. Now, they were starting to doubt everything they thought they knew. In the days after the event, humans didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no announcements, no rush to flaunt the newfound revelation. They remained calm, observing the coalition's movements, noting every adjustment in their formations, every change in communication patterns, every subtle shift in strategy. Humans didn't need to act immediately because they had already prepared for this moment. Their preparation wasn't about intimidation. It was about understanding. And patience was their most powerful weapon. As the coalition regrouped, humans quietly deployed their fleets. Not all at once, not openly, but with precision and careful planning. These fleets were not massive armies meant to destroy in brute force. They were specialized groups designed to observe, track, and contain any threat. Every ship had a purpose, and every captain knew exactly what to do. They moved silently, using routes that were previously considered empty or unimportant, taking paths that the coalition had never mapped. The coalition, confident in their earlier assessment, saw nothing unusual at first. They assumed humans were still hesitant, that they hadn't fully mobilized. But then the reports started coming in. Fleets were appearing in locations where they shouldn't exist. Weapon systems were online, and ships moved as if they were already in combat formation without firing a single shot. Alien commanders grew uneasy. They could no longer ignore the pattern. What they had believed to be weakness was actually strategy, and they had unknowingly walked into a situation far more dangerous than they anticipated. Humans didn't strike immediately. Instead, they began what some historians would later call the quiet hunt. This was not about war. It was about gaining control without unnecessary destruction. The humans targeted supply lines, communication hubs, and strategic points that were vital to the coalition's operations. At first, these actions were subtle. Ships appeared in orbit around key supply stations, disabling communications for a brief period, allowing humans to observe how the coalition responded. Every action was measured, every reaction recorded. The coalition began to panic. They didn't understand how humans could appear where they were least expected. Every attempt to intercept a human fleet failed, not because humans were reckless, but because they had anticipated every possible response. It was as if humans had studied their enemies' behavior for decades, predicting their moves before they were even made. At the same time, humans continued to protect their people. No innocent civilians were harmed. Research stations, colonies, and trade outposts were defended, not attacked. Every step was calculated to minimize unnecessary conflict while maximizing the understanding of the enemy. This approach confused the coalition even more. They had expected human reaction to be chaotic, emotional, unpredictable. Instead, it was precise, calm, and efficient. The coalition tried to communicate, to negotiate, to issue warnings and threats. Humans responded only when necessary, and even then, the responses were quiet but firm. For example, one communication from a human flagship simply included coordinates of a disabled supply fleet, along with a brief note: "Your actions are noted. Adjust accordingly." There was no anger, no shouting, no ultimatums. Just observation and clarity. The alien leaders realized slowly, almost painfully, that they had underestimated the patience of humanity. They had assumed humans would react to the first sign of threat with panic or a rush to fight. They had assumed humans would make mistakes under pressure. But humans had never rushed, never panicked, and had never revealed the full extent of their capabilities until now. As the days turned into weeks, the coalition's plans began to unravel. Supply chains were disrupted not through brute force, but through careful observation and targeted action. Commanders found their fleets isolated, their communications scrambled, and their resources stretched thin. Humans didn't attack directly. They allowed their enemies to reveal weaknesses first, then acted with precision. Every move was deliberate, every decision calculated. The more the coalition tried to fight back, the clearer it became that humans were always one step ahead. No fleet moved without detection. No supply line went unchecked. No communication channel was secure. Humans had created a network of observation and control that made the coalition vulnerable without ever directly engaging in traditional battle. Meanwhile, human leaders kept a constant focus on the big picture. They didn't celebrate each small success. They didn't boast. Their attention remained on understanding the coalition as a whole, how they reacted under pressure, how they made decisions, and how they would respond to the next challenge. Humans were patient hunters, and they understood that patience was more powerful than aggression. In some distant parts of the galaxy, neutral species began to notice what was happening. Stories spread quietly at first, then more widely. Humans were not just defending themselves. They were dismantling an aggressive coalition with precision and care. Their reputation as peaceful negotiators was being rewritten in real time. Where once they had been underestimated, now they were respected, cautiously observed, and even feared. Inside the coalition, confusion turned to fear. Commanders realized that humans had not just anticipated the present situation, they had prepared for years. Every potential threat had been studied, every possible route analyzed. The coalition's own assumptions about human weakness had been used against them. Their overconfidence had blinded them to humanity's true strength, patience, strategy, and an unyielding focus on observation. Some members of the coalition began to retreat quietly, not wanting to confront the humans directly anymore. Others tried to regroup and counterattack, only to find themselves isolated and outmaneuvered at every step. No matter what they did, humans seemed to anticipate it, and every attempt to gain the upper hand failed. Despite all of this, humans remained calm. There was no pride, no anger, no desire for vengeance. They were not seeking to destroy the coalition. They were seeking to understand, contain, and neutralize the threat efficiently. This combination of patience, strategy, and restraint made humans unlike any other species the galaxy had encountered. People across human worlds watched these events unfold through reports and communications. While the wider public was shielded from the full reality, there was a growing sense of quiet pride. Humans were not acting out of fear or aggression. They were acting out of careful, deliberate preparation. They were showing the galaxy that patience could be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than raw force. As the weeks passed, the coalition began to realize a hard truth. They had underestimated humans for far too long. Every small test, every minor intrusion, every assumption of weakness had been recorded, studied, and analyzed. And now, humans were moving quietly, efficiently, and with perfect timing to neutralize the coalition's advantage without unnecessary conflict. By the end of this period, it became clear to the galaxy that the humans' peaceful image had been only one layer of reality. Beneath it lay a species capable of strategy, observation, and restraint beyond anything most others could imagine. The coalition had learned this lesson the hard way, but the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand as well. Humans had not rushed into battle. They had not lashed out in anger. They had not revealed everything they had. But through careful planning, observation, and targeted action, they had shown a truth that could no longer be ignored. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They were patient hunters, calm observers, and precise actors, capable of dismantling threats without chaos or unnecessary destruction. And even as the coalition scrambled to recover, humans remained focused on the future. They were not seeking revenge. They were not acting impulsively. They were simply showing the galaxy that patience, preparation, and careful observation were far stronger than anyone had ever realized. By the end of this quiet but powerful campaign, it was clear to everyone paying attention. Humanity was no longer misunderstood. The galaxy had finally begun to see them as they truly were, not just peacekeepers, but patient hunters, capable of acting with precision, restraint, and clarity when the moment demanded it. The lesson was simple, but profound. Never underestimate those who wait, watch, and prepare. The galaxy had been watching humanity for centuries, thinking it understood them. They believed humans were calm, diplomatic, and unwilling to fight. They believed humans were slow to act, weak when tested, and easily intimidated. But after weeks of careful observation, targeted maneuvers, and quiet demonstrations of power, the coalition and the rest of the galaxy began to realize they had been completely wrong about no one outside humanity had ever seen what was coming. No one had anticipated the level of strategy, patience, and observation that humans could bring to a situation. And now, after weeks of careful movements and silent control, the truth was beginning to reveal itself. The coalition, which had once acted boldly near human borders, was now scattered and cautious. Ships that had once tested human defenses were retreating or hiding in distant sectors, trying to regroup, unsure where humans might strike next. Their confidence, which had been so high for so long, was now replaced by fear and uncertainty. They had assumed humans would act impulsively, but humans never acted impulsively. Every move was calculated, every response deliberate. Humans didn't rush into confrontation. They didn't fire first. They didn't make loud announcements or boast about their strength. Instead, they moved silently, like hunters who knew exactly where their prey would be. Supply lines were disrupted not through unnecessary destruction, but through precise actions that made the coalition vulnerable without anyone being harmed unnecessarily. Communication networks were controlled, and movements of the coalition were predicted and countered before they could cause trouble. What the galaxy began to understand slowly was this: humans weren't acting out of anger or aggression. They weren't seeking revenge. They weren't trying to dominate for the sake of dominance. Humans were acting because they understood the importance of preparation, observation, and patience. They had learned long ago that reacting too quickly could be dangerous, that moving without understanding could lead to mistakes, and that calm calculation was far more powerful than brute force. As the days passed, humans quietly expanded their presence, not in the sense of conquering or attacking, but in the sense of observation and protection. Every fleet movement, every fleet placement, every maneuver was done with precision. There was no chaos, no destruction, no panic. And yet, the coalition felt completely outmatched. The coalition's leaders began to realize a harsh truth. They had misjudged humanity. For centuries, they had assumed humans were weak, unpredictable, and too peaceful to act effectively. They had assumed that patience meant hesitation. But humans had shown the galaxy that patience was power. Silence had been their shield, observation their weapon, and understanding their greatest strength. In some distant systems, neutral species began to whisper among themselves. They had observed human movements and the dismantling of the coalition's influence. They began to understand that humans were not simply peaceful, they were strategic, disciplined, and capable of acting with perfect timing. Many realized that any future misunderstanding with humans could be extremely dangerous. Where once they had underestimated humanity, now they respected them, even feared them, for their careful precision. Humans didn't celebrate each success. They didn't boast about victories. They didn't flaunt their strength. Instead, they continued to observe, to learn, and to prepare for the future. Their goal had never been to humiliate or destroy the coalition. Their goal had always been to protect themselves and maintain order in their own space. And in doing so, they had revealed their true nature to the galaxy, calm, patient, and unyielding when the moment required action. One by one, the coalition's plans fell apart. Supply lines that had seemed secure were quietly disrupted. Fleets that had seemed coordinated were isolated and neutralized. Communication networks that had seemed reliable were intercepted and studied. And in every case, humans acted only after allowing the coalition to reveal its weaknesses. They did not strike blindly. They struck with full understanding, full preparation, and complete control. The coalition realized, too late, that humans had been preparing for this moment for decades. Every move they had made, every small test at the borders, every observation and calculation had been recorded, analyzed, and used to build a network of control and understanding. What the coalition thought was weakness had been a careful disguise, a way for humans to observe without revealing their full strength. Even as the coalition scrambled to recover, humans remained calm. They did not attack beyond necessity. They did not cause unnecessary harm. They acted with purpose and precision, never letting anger or emotion dictate their actions. Their patience, their discipline, and their observation were more powerful than any fleet of ships or weapons system. Across human worlds, people quietly celebrated the realization of what their species had achieved, not in loud parades or announcements, but in pride and understanding. Humans had defended themselves, secured their space, and demonstrated a truth that the galaxy would never forget. They had shown that peace does not mean weakness, and patience does not mean hesitation. The galaxy slowly began to adjust its understanding. Formerly aggressive species became more cautious. Neutral species began to approach humans with respect rather than assumption. And the coalition, once bold and arrogant, now acted with restraint and fear. Humanity had changed the balance of power not through violence, but through strategy, patience, and understanding. Historians would later describe this period as the moment the galaxy truly recognized the nature of humanity. For centuries, humans had been underestimated. For centuries, others had assumed their calmness was weakness. But when it mattered most, humans revealed themselves, not as reckless warriors, not as violent conquerors, but as patient, disciplined, and precise actors who could dismantle threats without chaos. The lesson the galaxy learned was simple yet profound. Those who are quiet, observant, and patient may appear harmless. But patience is a form of strength. Observation is a form of power. And understanding the world before acting is the most powerful tool of all. By the end of this period, the coalition had retreated in full. They no longer tested human borders. They no longer assumed weakness. And humans, for their part, had maintained calm, minimized unnecessary conflict, and ensured the safety of their people. The galaxy finally saw humans for what they truly were: patient hunters, capable of acting with precision, strategy, and purpose, always in control, always prepared. Humans had not sought to prove themselves through destruction or chaos. They had not acted out of revenge or pride. They had acted out of understanding, careful calculation, and the desire to protect themselves and their space. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy's perception forever. From that day forward, no one in the galaxy underestimated humans again. They were no longer seen as peaceful because they lacked strength. They were seen as peaceful because they had chosen to wait, to watch, and to act only when the time was right. The galaxy finally understood what humans had always known themselves: that patience, strategy, and observation could accomplish more than reckless aggression ever could. Humans were not simply peacekeepers, they were patient hunters. capable of defending their people and their space with unmatched precision and control. And the memory of this revelation would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humans had shown that true strength often hides beneath calm, and that those who wait, observe, and prepare are not weak, they are unstoppable. The story of humanity's quiet power had begun, and the galaxy would never forget it.